Now, when I first heard that, it happened to be from a woman, but I've heard it from plenty of men in my life, okay? When I first heard that, it was in a thing like this, okay? And she stood up and she said that, and she was so sweet, okay? And it's very difficult to deal with that, okay? But I turned to her and I very politely, I said, ma'am, you're right, and that's your problem. And that's my problem, and that's your problem, and that's your problem. God really does know our heart. We may fool everybody on the outside, but when the smoke clears, God does know what's going on in here. And Yeshua said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And you just reveal what's in there. Because if the Messiah is in there, then that is what you will do out here. That's our biggest problem. People saying one thing and doing another. And so, if I really, really, really knew, Ty, that God knows exactly what's going on in my heart, that would send fear and trembling right through me every day. Well, we've lost fear and trembling in America. We don't have a fear of God anymore. He's our good prosperity buddy and things like that. We don't have a real fear of knowing, because He's the only one we're supposed to fear. We're not supposed to fear whether the dollar's up, or the dollar's down, or whether the stock market's up, or the stock market's down. Those things we find ourselves fearing. Oh, we're going to have a new pope. What's this pope going to do? He's going to be a black pope. Oh, no, he's going to be a white pope. He's going to be a Roman pope. He's going to do. He's going to take us down. He's going to go to Jerusalem with Obama next month, and blah, blah, blah. We're fearing everything but God. Fearing everything but the one that we should fear. He's the only one. Now, the Pope doesn't know what's going on in here. As a matter of fact, my organization isn't here. The Pope isn't here. Brad isn't here. The Reverend is. The church isn't here. Messiah is here. That's the only thing that's here, okay? That's the one I should be imitating or mimicking, not all the other stuff. Sorry, I started to preach. Get back to teaching. His name means hell. We're going to spend some time with this because I need a marking board and all this kind of stuff. One of their evidences that surely just seals it for us, Paul's name means hell. Okay? Well, the root of Paul's name comes from the same root as hell. Yes, it does. Okay? Or Hades, Sheol. Okay? It does come from that root. But the root, Shin, Aleph, Lamed, in Hebrew means to remove from one place and put into another. That's what the parent root means. When we talk about parent roots of words, even though we may attempt to pronounce the word, the parent root is something you can't pronounce. I catch myself doing all the time too. Well, the parent of this word is Sha'al. Okay, well, Sha'al is in the third person masculine, singular, and so forth, and that's not the root of it. Because Sha'al is translated as to desire or ask for something. The parent root will just be a shin, an aleph, and a lamed. You won't actually be able to pronounce it. And it means to remove from one place and put into another. Now when you start adding vowels to that word, I said I wasn't going to do it, now here I am doing it. When you start adding vowels to the word, now you start giving the various nuances of removing from one place and putting it to the next. So when I add the patah and the kametz, I don't expect you all to know that, it's sha'al. Sha'al is to ask or to desire. So when I ask you something, ma'am, I'm removing something from you to me. I'm removing information from you to me. So Hebrew employs the idea of removing something from one place to another when you ask somebody something. Now I slightly changed the vowel structure to produce Shaul, which will have a shurik in there. Okay? Now when that vowel structure is there, now Paul's name means to desire, which is very similar to ask. But we just dress it up a little bit. We do that with people's names, that you get a name book, baby name book, Hebrew names book, and they always make them flower up the words. Because in reality, if someone was named something, it turned out to be cow dung. Okay? Well, we're not going to say, his name means cow dung. What we'll say is, an unpleasant odor in the field. Okay, in other words, we'll dress the word up a little bit, because that's what we do with babies' names, because nobody wants to run around with cow dung, okay, as a meaning of their name. Same is true with my name. If you take my name and you investigate it in the flowery version, it will say, a broad meadow. Okay? But if you look up what it really means, it means a thin wire nail with a small head. So I'm really the pinhead. Hey, listen, the longer you laugh, the longer you live, right? The more you laugh, the longer you live. So nobody's learned anything, but you're all going to live 6 months longer when you walk in, okay? And of course, one of the last ones is that Paul couldn't be an apostle because there's only 12 apostles' names written in the 12 foundations. This is a popular one out there. And so Paul, in other words, only the first 12 could be apostles because there's only 12 names written in the foundation of the temple in the book of Revelation. But what they're failing to see, of course, is that what it actually says is pretty much what is there, and that is there's 12 apostles' names are written in the foundations. They're written in the foundations. Okay? Why? Well, if you know anything about building things at that time, by the way, they still do the same things today when they build very tall buildings. Back in those days, when they would lay the foundation of a large structure, okay, the architects, the ones who did the work and laid the foundation would write their names in the foundation. Why? Because they were responsible for laying the foundation. Many people do it today when they make tall buildings. If the buildings come down and get an opportunity to look at the cornerstones and stuff, you'll see their names written into it. That's a very common thing for the people who are involved in actually making it. Someone places a piece of cement in front of their house and driveway or whatever, and they put their handprint there, they put the date, and they write their names in it, okay? That has nothing to do with the rest of the house. That has nothing to do with what the rest of the house that sits up on top of the foundation is all about. It's just the foundational part, okay? And there's where they lose their accusation as well. Paul comes from Tarsus in Cilicia. I'm not going to belabor these things much longer because I wanted to get to Halakhah and Agadah, so we'll skip all this. Obviously, the series is out there in the marketplace. I don't want to do too much shameless promotion, but obviously that's how we get from town A to town B. And so the series goes through all the details of this. And if you do get the series itself, which I think is 8 CDs, you can get the PowerPoint, though, so you can follow the PowerPoints just by getting on my website, wildreds.org, and getting on there and down the PowerPoints. A lot of things out. Let's cut to this one. Remember one of the accusations was that all the other apostles hated Paul because he was teaching against the Torah. That's what they believed, he was teaching against the Torah, so that's why they all hated him. Now remember, these accusations are not coming from quote-unquote, I have to say the C word, Christian theologians. These are coming from Hebrew roots Messianic people. Okay, they're not because those who follow the C word, okay, do believe that Paul did away with the Torah. Okay, so they don't have any accusations against Paul. They love him. Okay, so it's not coming from them. Okay, I just want to stress that. And so we go to 2 Peter chapter 3, an account of the long suffering of our Master is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul. Now I don't know about you, but if I hate my brother, I don't call him my beloved brother so-and-so. But that's not the most interesting thing. Of all the people who say it, it's Peter. The only one recorded, particularly in the book of Acts, who seemed to have a problem with Paul is the one who says, he is my beloved brother. And then he goes on to say, according to the wisdom given unto you, hath written unto you. Now, by the way, they have an answer to what I just said. According to our beloved brother Paul, yet he calls them that. Their answer is that, well, the second epistle of Peter should also be removed from the text. I'm serious as I can be, okay? There's a whole chapter on why 2 Peter shouldn't be in there either, okay? So once again, there went the appendix. Well, we didn't need the appendix anyway, right? Okay, there went the spleen. Okay, then he goes on to say, as also on all his epistles, speaking in them of these things in which things are hard to be understood. You all are familiar with this verse. I bet you've read it 100 times. I hope maybe I can add a dot to this verse as well. I'm not here to turn it upside down. I'm here to add something that's in perfect context with everything we're talking about here. And that is, apparently, Peter is acknowledging that Paul says things that are hard to be understood. But that was prophesied all over the Old Testament. From the Torah, particularly in the book of Deuteronomy, into Isaiah, Zechariah, and Jeremiah, even in the Psalms, all these things were prophesied that in the latter days, God's own people would be blind and deaf and dumb. Now, I've already done my homework. I suggest you do yours. Don't trust what I'm saying. But I've already done it. I can assure you that between 88% and 90% of the time blind and deaf is used in the Bible. It's not talking about people who are actually blind and really can't hear. The words are used to describe people who don't understand. they don't know. They're in darkness. Even the Shema, hear, O Israel, means understand what I'm saying, okay? So most of the time, the word blind and deaf is referring, they won't know, they won't understand. So over and over and over in the writings of the prophets, they told us that God's own people in the latter days would be blind and deaf. Seeing they will not see, hearing they will not hear. We're going to give you lots of examples in a minute, or sufficient amount to be able to move on. That the fact that in the latter days, Paul would be hard to understand. The same thing is referred to many times with their conversations with Yeshua and his comments about the Sabbath. They wouldn't understand him either. Why? They were blind and they were deaf, meaning they did not know, they didn't understand. And you've got to grasp these things about the guy who sees people as trees walking and things like that. All testify to the same truth. So this is not something that came up out of a vacuum. This was prophesied. But it goes on. This is where it gets interesting. In which they that are unlearned and unstable, which is associated with what? Those who are blind and deaf. They don't know. They don't understand. And so they rest as they do the other scriptures. And here's the key phrase, unto their own destruction. Now I'm going to sum this up, and I want to make sure that you agree with what I'm saying, because I don't want to lead the witness, so to speak. As what we just read, is it safe to say that there's some people in which see Paul as hard to be understood, and so because they're unlearned and unstable, because they don't know, they twist what he says, and the result is their own destruction? Is that safe to say? I want to make sure I'm not leading you some down a rosy path or whatever. So what I'm saying is prophesied that in the end of times, people who don't know and who don't understand are going to misunderstand what Paul says, and as a result, they're going to conclude that Paul threw the Torah out, and what's the result? Their own destruction. But how many times does that happen in the Bible? Over and over and over again, when God's people do turn away from his commandments and do what they want to do it their ways, they end up perishing, corrupted, defile themselves, and they self-destruct. And I'm going to give you some examples of that, but there's nothing new about this. See, one of the unique things about the Bible, I'm sure you're all familiar with this phrase, and that is patterns. One of the things we understand about the Bible is there's patterns over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. Does it sound like I'm yelling at you? Sometimes I have to stop myself. I think I'm yelling. This is just one of my little accents. To me, if something's from God, it's true and it's important. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. You don't have to look in some cobwebby corner for months finding one verse to back up your position. If it's true and it's important, it's everywhere. Not just everywhere in your Bible, but everywhere growing outside the window. It's revealed in how life works. How God could say the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork, because it's all revealed in the simple things of creation. But the adults come along and they make it doctrine and theology and things like that. And they remove the simplicity from it. As a matter of fact, when I read 2 Corinthians chapter 11, that was the problem in the beginning, right? Do not let the enmity draw you away from the simplicity that is in the Messiah. Now that word Hebrew is yashar, okay? It's not necessarily the simplicity as we understand it. It pipped it again. How do you know that ahead of time? Well, those things don't last very long. No more Power Rangers. Okay, we got this down. Okay. We got a system going here. Okay. Where was I talking about?
Yashar. Yashar.
Oh, Yashar. Thank you. Thanks for taking care of me. I'll give you double. Okay. Yashar, which is a word that means straight. Straight and right. It's translated straight and right. For example, it's used as also to reason. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18. Let us reason together. In other words, let us make things straight together. Okay? And so, let me give you some examples. Devarim, Deuteronomy 31:29. For I know that after my death. Now, these words that are underlined here are the exact same words used in the Greek here. Okay? For I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt. Notice this in the reflexive. See, this is in the reflexes, unto their own. In grammar, we call that in the reflexive. It means they're doing it to themselves. God didn't do it to them. They're doing it to themselves. Same true is here. For I know that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you when? In the latter days. Here we are in the latter days, and they're being destroyed. Things are going into their own destruction. Why? Because they turned away aside from the which I have commanded you. And they did evil in the sight of Yahweh. Here's another example. I denounce unto you because you have turned away, worshipped other gods, served them. In the Bible, some of you well know that the idea of serving false gods is in tandem with turning away from what he says to do. Is spoken of as serving other gods. Because there's no middle thing here. Yeshua said you're either for me or against me. Well, I'm not serving God, but I'm not serving the devil either. Well, I'm sorry. There's no entity in between. There's no like Hillary Clinton or something. I'm serving Hillary Clinton. She's in between God and the devil. You could have picked someone else. I just chose her. Okay? There's no middle person here. He says, and because of that, you shall surely perish and not prolong your days upon the land, whether you pass over the Jordan to go to possession. Another example. It shall be, if you do it all, forget Yahweh your God and walk after other gods and serve them. This will be in more context later. And worship them. I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish. Same word used back in 2 Peter. As the nations which Yahweh destroyed before your face, so shall ye perish. Why? Because ye would not be obedient to the voice of Yahweh your God. We're always due. Some of the greatest historians in America will tell you over and over and over the biggest problem that we have as history was we never learn from it. We never learn from what the past mistakes and the past things that we've already done. That's why Romans chapter 15 verse 4, am I talking fast enough for you? Romans chapter 15 verse 4 says, for the things of our ancestors and so forth that were given for our learning, that we might have hope. Things like this. So we should learn what they did that was wrong and not do the same things, what he's trying to say, because we're supposed to have hope from that, not destruction. They know not, neither will they understand. Why? They walk in darkness. See, being blind or darkness is associated with not knowing, not understanding from the very beginning. And the result of that, of course, is the foundations of the earth are out of course, and it gets worse. Hear now this, O foolish people, and without understanding, which have eyes and see not, and ears and hear not. Yeshua is going to say the same thing, particularly in the Gospel of Matthew. Quoting Isaiah, you have eyes to see, but you don't hear. Okay, in other words, you don't see. Pay no attention to what I just said, okay? Meaning you're blind and you're deaf. Now, I want you to notice that this is prophesied of God's own people, not the nations. He's speaking of his own people are going to end up doing this. Very interesting thing that I don't have time to do. Let's go right to Halakhah. Let's talk about Halakhah. How many have heard this teaching before? There's a few of you that have. A few of you, at least keep your hands up. A few of you have? Okay, all right. All right, bear with the ones. Bear with us, okay, as we go through this. I know you've heard this before. Sometimes I say some goofier things when it's repeated again. Than before. Okay, Halakhah. What is Halakhah and why would it be important? There it is in the Hebrew that you're all accustomed to in your Chumash or whatever you read your Hebrew in. Hey, Lamed, Kaf, Hey. Hey, Lamed, Kaf, Hey. Halakhah. That is in Sephardic. Halakhah. You may hear some people say Halakhah. That is Ashkenazi. Same word, just accented on a different syllable. If you look it up in a Strong's Concordance, and I highlight the word concordance, it'll say to walk, to go forth away, or to follow. That's what the word, that's how the word is defined. And some of you know what I'm saying when I say this, downstream. Most of you know what I mean when I say downstream. Okay, some of you have been around me long enough to know that I do not believe that the English or the Greek of your New Testament is pagan. I believe we're just reading words that are downstream. And our Father, for just such a time as this, wants to bring them back upstream. He wants to bring the meaning, because words are like water. And in the beginning, when the water first comes down in the beginning, where's the end revealed? The beginning, when the water first comes down on the mountaintops, what's the water like? It's pure, it's fresh, it's pristine, it's full of oxygen and energy, and it's actually good to drink. What happens when the words, the water, comes down the mountain and gets into the valleys? Then people dump stuff into the words, or the water. They take stuff out, they dump stuff in, they take stuff out. What's the water look like by the time it gets to the ocean? Looks like the Gulf of Mexico, if you will. Brown, thick, yucky, no good to drink anymore. Same water. It's just because things have added to it and taken things away from it, it's not good to drink anymore. So the Father wants to bring us upstream. That's the major reason why He's turning that pure language back to the people. Is for that reason alone. So He can bring us back upstream where the water is pure. The reason I say that is because the Strong's Concordance is way downstream. That's why James Strong called it a concordance. Too many people use it as a dictionary. I even get people that have very serious subjects of something. I hope there's nobody in here like that, so they'll jump on me later. But I have people email me very serious subjects that they've dived in depth in, but concerning moons and calendars and how to pronounce names and all these kind of things. And the definitions of the words in this very serious study come from a Strong's. How do I know? It says H2753, G2921. And I know they're quoting me a Strong's definition. I'm going, you're doing something deep and you're quoting something way downstream, and I just really don't have time to deal with the rest of it if it's as shallow as that, okay? The idea is to take it back to the top. Mr. Strong did not design this thing to be a dictionary. That's why he called it a concordance. Those are two different things. He says it's from the roots Yod Lamed Kaf or He Lamed Kaf, depending on your grammarian. It looks like this in the ancient Hebrew, Yod Lamed Kaf. Now, we're going to break this down in its mechanical or its concrete form. As you can see, the Yod is the letter of the hand, the Lamed is the letter of the shepherd's staff, and the Kaf is the letter of the open palm of the hand. Can you see why that is? Because, as some of you well know, in its ancient form, when you take these things back to the mountaintop, it's childlike. The pictures look like what they describe, or what they mean. This is the hand of a person. Can you see the elbow and the hand on the end of it? A shepherd's staff looks like a shepherd's staff. It means to lead. The open palm of the hand looks like an open palm of the hand. So the first letter means to, if you will, that concept of a hand. There it is. Second letter is to lead. Third letter, kaf, is to train or tame someone. So the original meaning of this kaf on the end is very important. Because taking someone by the hand and leading them is followed by an open palm of the hand. Why would that be important? Because it's a shepherding term when it starts. It doesn't start as something that humans do, or it's something to deal with humans, but rather agricultural, out in the field with the sheep. And the shepherd would take many times his hand and lay it upon the leading sheep and guide him into the fold. And then when he guided that first sheep into the fold, what did all the other sheep do? They followed that sheep into the fold. And then they would put thorns over it, and he would watch them and protect them over the night and so forth. So the idea first comes from a shepherd laying his hand on the head of the sheep to guide it to where it needs to go. What is the right place to go? Where the sheep will be safe from the wolves overnight. And then all the other sheep follow him in. Now from that point forward, fathers begin to use this to bless the firstborn sons in their bar mitzvah. Okay? Because in the culture at that time, and this is still true in some synagogues you go to today. It was true when I bar mitzvahed my son, and it's been several synagogues that I've gone and see these things done. Sometimes they maintain some of the older traditions, so forth, drawn from Scripture. Because in a bar mitzvah in those days, they didn't have the bar mitzvah on the 13th birthday. That is more of a common thing because of the exile. It was more like a coming of age. That's where the bar mitzvah thing kind of comes from, because virtually every culture had a coming of age for their young sons. And the coming of age generally across the world is between the 12th and 13th year of the boy's life. Now the reason why they have it in the 13th year now, at least for several centuries, is because of the exile. Because and then they all lived in family groups together and they traveled from one place to the next. And guess what? The father's sons lived with them and they built onto their house, and their grandsons lived in that part, and they built on another part of the house and so forth. That's the way family life was back then. Everybody was together at the same time. But no, in the exile, we're scattered all over the place. And so when the son has the bar mitzvah, people come from foreign lands. They got to book airplane flights. They got to book motels. They can't just come swinging by any old time. Okay? And so they have to prepare for these things. So they just made it on the 13th birthday of the boy, and that way people could plan ahead to come to the bar mitzvah. Also, as I said earlier, it was incumbent upon the firstborn son to take upon the profession of his father. The second, third, and fourth did not necessarily have to do that, but the firstborn son took upon the profession of his father. So if his father was a mason, a brick mason, the son, not a Freemason, if the father was a brick mason, then the son was a brick mason. If the father was a carpenter, okay, the son was a carpenter, okay? And this is the way they did things. And so it's just a coincidence, if you will, that when we go to Luke chapter 4, as you well know, Yeshua is going to Jerusalem during the what? Passover season. Why did it tell us it was the Passover season? And why did it tell us that he was 12 years old? Because if Yeshua was born in the fall, like most of us understand, then Passover meant he was how old? Just about exactly 12 and a half years old. Between the 12th and the 13th year. When I was confirmed in the Lutheran church when I was young, I was confirmed between the 12th and the 13th year. This is the common thing across the world. It's not just a Hebrew thing. And so, as you well know, his parents misplaced him and they don't know where he's at. And then at the end, he says something there that I had my son say when it was his bar mitzvah, and I'm going to several bar mitzvahs in the last 20, 30 years of my life in which they maintain this tradition that's a couple thousand years old, and that is that when the son finishes his portion at the Bema seat and closes the Torah portion, he turns to the crowd and he says, "Now I will be about my Father's business." Because the firstborn son took upon the profession of his father, okay? So what does Yeshua say when his parents find him? Did you not know? Don't you know what goes on here? Okay? Did you not know I would be about my Father's business? Well, what father was he actually talking about? Okay? See, I tricked you. I did that on purpose. I'm sorry. I purposely manipulated words to get you to say that. Okay? It was a natural thing, but it's my fault. As a matter of fact, usually I announce this when I start the whole thing, and I forgot to do it. That during the course of when I do this whole thing, there's 2 times I'm going to deceive you on purpose. And I will tell you those 2 times when I do it. Okay? Because words they mean things. They're very important. Okay? I led you down that road. I made you say that. Okay? Because of the way I said it. Okay? Let me tell you why I did that. I did that because traditionally in Western countries, we're kind of trained that we immediately spiritualize things, okay? We kind of set the literal things aside and we spiritualize things. And so because of that, we have systems in which this group of people over here take everything virtually literally, and everything over here take them only spiritually, and so forth, when the reality in Hebraic thinking is that both are true. That's why I hope, if I have time to go through this, basically what I want to show you is this: from Greek thinking, we're all forced to choose either this or it's that. It's choose one or the other. But in Hebrew, it's always going to be choose one before the other. There's a difference between choosing one or the other, or one comes before the other one. There's a difference between those 2 things. So here's the reality. He was speaking of that father when he said that. But did he not follow the profession of Joseph, which is his stepfather? I understand that. Did he not do that? So that's just another testimony of he did them both. He did it in a physical scene on the earth, and he was speaking of his father up above as well, because he was going to take upon the profession of Joseph as well. And so this is something that's part, once again, of the bar mitzvah, to lead them back and forth. I want you to get that image in your mind of leading someone back and forth, because now we're going to quickly get to Agadah. So I'll make sure I can get as much of this in as I can, because